So let's go on with Thor's. And before we begin Thor, I kind of have to admit I'm not a big fan of the character. In more recent years, I've become a big more fan of him and more aware of the character and everything else. But out of the main core Avengers, him, Iron Man, Cap, Hulk, etc., he was the one I was the least interested about. As such, I didn't really watch the movie when it first came out, only watching it later for the sake of this movie marathon and just so I can get just the Marvel MCU continuity as a whole. And because Thor 3 looks really, really good. That trailer is so good, guys. Anyway, in the past, Odin, King of Asgard, warred against the Frost Giants of Jotunheim, and if I'm able to pronounce that correctly, I will applaud myself. As well as their leader, Laufey. If I pronounce that wrong, I will also applaud myself. Because, my god, do I suck at pronunciations. Anyway, he managed to steal the source of their power, the Casket of Winters. A plot point is a plot point, but also not a plot point. You'll find out why later. Years later, Odin's son, Thor, raises himself to take up his father's place as king, but is interrupted by an attack of the Frost Giants seeking to steal the Casket of Winters. Thor reignites the war, and because of his hubris, is cast out by his father and sent to Earth, losing his godly powers, and gets his hammer, the source of his power, enchanted, that only the worthy may wield it, and thus gain the power of Thor. Anyway, while he's stuck on Earth, Thor encounters Jane Foster and her mentor, Eric Selvig. If I pronounce that correctly, I'll also give myself an applaud, as he plans to retrieve his hammer. All the while, Thor's stepbrother Loki plans to land with the Frost Giants, his true father Laufey, while also planning his own secret plan to prove his own worthiness. There's a lot of people proving that they're worthy in this movie is what I'm getting at. I have to admit, much to my surprise, this is a pretty good one. I consider this one to be the worst of the Phase 1 movies, but I still consider it to be the worst of the Phase 1 movies, but it's still a lot better than what I thought of going in. Anyway, so let's talk about comic book changes for a minute, shall we? Thor being sent to Earth indeed something that happened in the comics, but it went a little bit further than that. In the comics, Odin forced Thor's essence into the body of a medical student named Donald Blake, as well as Thor's hammer was turned into a walking stick that Blake discovers while running some aliens. It makes sense in context. And no, the current status of Thor has him separated from Donald Blake, although also Jane Foster is currently Thor as well, to date this video. And I have no idea when Donald Blake stopped being a thing, or what, because in the Infinity Gauntlet there was a completely new guy playing Thor. It's really weird comic book continuity, and and Thor's continuity is already weird enough because they have to work around the myth and legends as well, so I really don't want to delve deeper than I have to in this case. Also, Loki. They get Loki so right in this movie in terms of the myth and the comics. He's conniving and sneaky, but at the same time, always struggling with his own personal issues that seem to hold him back. Throughout the comic, Loki's one of the various characters that rides the line between being a villain and being misunderstood. And like all those characters, it depends on who's writing him, because half the time he's evil trying to murder Thor and take over Asgard, the other half he's just trying to prove he's as good, if not better than Thor, to prove his worthiness to his adoptive family. Anyway, it does all come back to him when he tries to murder Thor over and over again, but again, this depends on who's writing him, if he's a good guy or a bad guy. And I have to admit, the biggest change in this movie is making the Asgardians their own alien race that just happen to look like humans. In the comics, they are actually gods, which is confusing because all myths are true and all myths aren't true. It's really confusing, and my god, does it mess up the cosmic scale of things. It's just a lot simpler to make them all aliens, so I don't have to think about it that hard, because we have the Asgardians being real, the Olympians being real, Japanese mythology being real. It makes no sense, and yet it does at the same time. It's so freaking weird. So I can kind of see why I decided to just change it to they're aliens. Duh. Make all their things hyper advanced technology. This also means that we don't have true magic in this universe up until Doctor Strange happens, but I'm okay with that. I am very much okay with that. And the end credit scene. Like previous ones, this was ultimately set up for the next movie, but in terms of the meta narrative between all these movies, this is the biggest leap forward we've had to Avengers in the longest time, since Iron Man 1. Overall, I do have to say I'd enjoyed this movie. I honestly wasn't considering much out of a Thor movie, considering again I'm not really that big of a fan of the character, and only in recent years have become even that much interested in Thor. So yeah, I like this movie. I like the Asgardians, and I think it's a pretty good one. So till next time.